Right, I hope you can hear me. Fantastic. Welcome to the University of Surrey, to the Surrey Centre for Cybersecurity, our first real event, which is a hybrid event and a joint event. And there's an annoying echo in the hall. So we have a real audience and we have an online audience. So if you catch people actually looking off to stages left, right and centre, it's because we're in the real world. So it's really good to see the people in this lecture theatre, and it's really good to see the numbers that we've got online. So as I said, a joint hybrid event. So we're delivering this both in real and online. We've also got joint hybrid speakers. So we've got some real speakers here, and we've also got some speakers online who will be talking. A really exciting topic. Before we dive into that, I just want to remind everyone the COVID precautions. So we gave everyone notes for that. Try and remember to wear your masks when you're moving around. Masks are okay when you're sitting down, when you're eating, drinking, or presenting. But otherwise, try and keep masks. Is what we do at the university, and what we encourage our students to do. Without further ado, I'd like to ask our two joint sponsors, so Professor Steve Schneider and Martin Smith of the SASIG. So I'm going to ask Steve to kick off with a couple of slides about the University of Surrey's cyber work. Steve.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'm delighted to welcome you to this hybrid event. This is the first of these Future of Cybersecurity events that we're doing for real, and so welcome to everyone who's physically here, and also welcome to everyone who's tuning in online. So I'll just say a few words about the Surrey Centre for Cybersecurity. So I'm the director, Steve Schneider, and let's get this. We've been here at the university as the Centre for Cybersecurity there's been security work going on here for nearly 2 decades. We set up the centre in 2014 to consolidate cyber research from across the university. And currently we have about over 40 academics and researchers in the group doing research into various aspects of cybersecurity. We've got recognition from the National Cybersecurity Centre as an academic centre of excellence, both in cybersecurity research. We've had that since 2015, and also more recently in cybersecurity education. So we've got a gold level recognition of that. We had that from the inaugural rollout of the ACSE recognition since 2020. We're one of only 4 universities that has that. And then we also have a Master's in Information Security that's accredited by GCHQ. And we contribute into standards work, and I'll just talk a bit about some of the research areas that we cover. So in terms of our expertise, we focus on foundations and applications. So in terms of foundations, we look at trusted systems, systems that are resilient, secure, privacy, and so on. So we work in areas like verification, that's proving that systems meet particular security properties. Distributed systems for resilience. One of the specialisms of that we've been involved in for some time is in blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. And then we have some strong activity in communications and networks, and in conjunction with the 5G Innovation Centre, also at Surrey. More recently, we've been looking at aspects of social media and how you have to worry about the flow of information and the ways in which that can be misused. And we have a very strong group in applied cryptography, so that's also one of our specialisms. And that includes the post-quantum cryptography work that today's event is about. So that's one of the areas that we specialise in, and that's what in part what's led to the topic for today. So you'll be hearing more about that particular aspect of our work in the talks coming up, in the first talk coming up. And then in terms of the application areas, the application domains, we take these foundations and we apply them in particular areas. And the areas that we focus most strongly on are in transport, and that's both rail and automotive, so various security aspects in there. Government, so things like electronic voting, digital identity, distributed ledger technologies use there. So that's another application domain. Communications, I've already mentioned, clearly very strong security requirements in communication systems and in finance. So electronic payments, fraud detection, transactions, digital economy, and so on. So those are the main application areas that we work in. So we look at the stack from foundational research through to application domains where we make a real difference. So just one example of this. In the news recently, you may have seen in the last couple of weeks, an attack on the way in which Visa and Apple Pay interact. So we have, so this just broke a couple of weeks ago, and here is the front page of the BBC website, and there's this this news article on researchers find Apple Pay a Visa contactless hack. And you can see on the front page, it's even above Britney Spears at that time. Really their top story for a while. That was researchers at Surrey, in conjunction with colleagues in Birmingham, discovered this attack, and it's made about 300 news outlets around the world. So this is a way in which a kind of contactless payment transaction can be undermined, and money can be taken out of a phone that's got this enabled, even without needing to unlock the phone. So this is an example of the kind of work that's going on here in kind of protocols and finance. And in fact, two of the team, Lee and also Chris, are here in the audience at the moment, and Ioana Urianu is the kind of lead from Surrey on that. So I just show this as an example of some of the research that goes on here that kind of makes an impact out in the real world. So that's all I'm going to say about the Surrey Centre for Cybersecurity.
So now for our co-host, Martin Smith, who's going to tell us something about the SASIG. SASIG have been a wonderful organisation to work with. Here's Martin, the founder and chairman of SASIG.
Yeah, I've got an echo. I'm hoping that there's about 100 more people or plus watching this through that screen. So hello, everybody. I don't know, is that all working okay? Do we know? It's perfect. Well, welcome, everybody. Oh, I've got some buttons. I confidently said I knew how to use this at the beginning, so I'm hoping I can. Yeah. The Security Awareness Special Interest Group is a networking forum for, pre-COVID it was 3,500, post now it's 6,000. It's grown tremendously during the pandemic because we went online, and we've been doing presentations online every day since March 20 to cybersecurity professionals, was UK, may now around the world. It's a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, safe zone. It's where cybersecurity professionals, academics, government, suppliers can come together and talk with each other about cybersecurity issues. It's sponsored by a number of organizations, both public sector, private sector, corporates, suppliers, right mix. But it's a no selling environment. It's a genuine think tank that encourages us to address the issues, which is why I'm so pleased to be here today with Andrew and Steve. The opportunity for our community to consider things like I know you are about where things are going in the future is fabulous. And I think we're talking about doing more of these already. So something like today's topic is fascinating, and I'm really, really pleased to be here. Just as a snapshot, next week, the week after, all sorts of topics, 3 times a week. If anybody wants to join in, doesn't know about SASIG, go to our website and join us. It's all free, everything's free with the SASIG. And we cover every topic we can possibly think of. That one at the bottom there is just the importance of being courteous with each other, nice with each other when we're doing business. Those are the sorts of issues that I like to think about rather than just the straightforward, difficult, techie stuff. Yeah, we've got the National Police Chiefs Council, which is the old ACPO, if you remember, the Association of Chiefs. It's all the forces in the country coming together. We've got a major event there. If anybody wants to come to that, it's a real event at the Kia in Oval. That's a free event as well. That's where we're trying to get the police, law enforcement to work more closely with business to help fight cybercrimes. All good stuff, I think. Thank you for being here, for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. As I said, there's loads of SASIG people out there that know me. If you don't know SASIG, please join in. It's a great way to think about the whole cybersecurity conundrum.
Thanks, Martin. I thought he was bravely going to start giving Lee's presentation, post-quantum cryptography. I was looking forward. So now it gives me great pleasure to invite our own Professor Chen to kick off the presentations. Now you're doing this as a joint presentation with one of your colleagues who's going to kick in remotely. So we're really pushing the boundaries here. You've got half a presentation in the real and half online. And so we hope we get that now.
Thank you. I'm Li Chen, and join with me, I have two colleagues from Huawei, Sylvia and Roberto. They are in Munich. And Sylvia will join me for half of the presentation, and for Roberto, you will see his demos and after our panelists' discussions. Okay, let's start. The talk is about post-quantum cryptography and the future of trusted computing. As you all know, for cybersecurity, we have three major aspects: security, privacy, and trust. Security and privacy are well known. Probably people have talking about them a lot. Trust is getting there, getting popular, and draw a lot of attention recently, but much less mature or the well used in the world. What do we mean trust? For computer security, trust means trusted computing. So trusted computing is try to solve a problem which let people generally believe their computer system behave like they're supposed to be. It's a very simple, straightforward question, whether my computer actually do what I think it's doing. But this question is not easy to answer. Yeah. Trusted computing research have been doing it for over 20 years, try to solve the problem. We actually get a solution, at least I believe, but we are still looking for people who use it to benefit from it. So we want our computer to be correctly functional, including our personal device, which like PCs, phones, and cars even. And we also want our remote services doing correctly, like a bank, the shops, and any cloud service providers. They use their computer systems. And more recently, we also consider not only individual device, individual computer should be trustworthy, but also the whole system, including like networks. For example, the Swarm network should be trustworthy. To build a trusted computing system, number one things we need to do is to choose a root of trust. We need to start from somewhere. Yeah. So root of trust is the first point. Actually, we have already seen a lot of trusted devices They are designed to serve as a root of trust. I'm sure you have heard some of them, if not all of them, like Trusted Platform Module, TPM, and SGX, Trust Zone, Theta, Parental, C2, TCM, and TBCM. Those are probably only available in China. And the very first one is Talus's HSM. I'm sure Adrian will be able to tell us much more about how the HSM is used as the root of trust. Let's take a TPM as the example. TPM, although from the designer, Trusted Computing Group, which is an industry standard body, specify TPM specifications. From their point of view, TPM could be everything. So not only hardware, could be the firmware or software, but the essential version of TPM is a very small, cheaper hardware device. It is embedded in many of our computers, particularly for the personal PC and a lot of servers as well. TPM provides a lot of security functions. The number one security function is called attestation service. So what that means? That means TPM sitting inside of our computer, measure the state of the computer, report the state, let anybody, doesn't matter is local or remotely, to verify the state. So this measurement, reporting, and verification solutions is called an attestation service. TPM actually works as a cryptographic coprocessor. We also say TPM is a crypto engine. TPM supports various crypto algorithms, basically including asymmetric encryption, symmetric encryption, digital signatures, anonymous digital signatures, like direct anonymous attestation, DAA, and also message authentication code, hash function, and key exchanges. So this slide lists the algorithms currently TPM support. But when a large-scale quantum computer became a reality, many algorithms from TPM will be broken. So that means in quantum computer age, today's TPM will not survive from quantum attack. What can we do? We need a smooth transition from today's TPM to a future TPM that will be secure against quantum computer attacks. That is exactly what the project names talk about, future TPM. So future TPM is a EU H2020 project. So the project including 15 partners from 10 different countries, and both Surrey and Huawei are partners. So Surrey played the technical leading role in this project, and Huawei is a very important industry demonstrator creator. Yeah. We both joined this project, make our contributions. So project started in the beginning of 2018 for 3 years. So you can tell project have completed, but even so, the research is still ongoing. future TPM has a very simple target. We want to design a quantum resistant trusted platform module. So that one we called QRTPM. But the project also have a list of operations, the objectives that include a full set of QR crypto algorithms, which should be targeted for inclusion in the next generation of TPM. Then a full range of implementation of TPM environment. So we would like to test our algorithms in different TPM environment, including hardware, software, and virtual machines. So we also check a runtime assessment and the real-world user case. We have 3 real-world user cases. They are the mobile payment and personal activity track and the device management. So device management is the one we're going to take example to introduce you in this presentation. So this user case was led by my colleagues from Huawei. They are Surrey and Roberto. That's why they became involved in our in this presentation. And I will let Sylvia to introduce this user case, and you will have chance to see the demonstration by Roberto later on. Okay, Sylvia, you must be somewhere.
Yes.
Now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lee, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Silvio Vlasciano. I'm leading Trusted Computing and System Integrity Research at Huawei in the NIST Research Center. And I'm glad to introduce to you our contribution to the Future TPM project. As Lee mentioned, Huawei has been responsible for the device management use case, which we have modeled on the scenario of an enterprise network infrastructure. This is, of course, a very familiar scenario for Huawei, as we are also one of the biggest providers of telecommunication infrastructures. Our enterprise network selected for this demonstrator is composed of network elements, particularly routers, network management system, or NMS, as well as endpoints, such as laptops and servers that communicate over the network. You can see on the right side of the screen a diagram which tries to convey the relationship between the routers and the NMS. Practically, the NMS is controlling all the routers in the system and is periodically monitoring their activity, sending to them management commands in response to certain network events. Our goal with this demonstrator is to leverage trusted computing and the quantum-resistant TPM researched in the Future TPM project to influence the routing policy in the network so that the traffic goes as much as possible through trustworthy routers only. So why do we need Future TPM for our scenario? That is because without hardware-anchored protection, current network management solutions have significant weaknesses. These solutions would benefit from the introduction of trusted computing and Future TPM technology to address the following aspects. First, weak device identification. In general, the device key is stored in these routers or in traditional network devices in the device storage on the disk and pretty much unprotected. Also, software integrity is not monitored. For example, a compromised router could ignore management commands sent by the NMS or could influence the routing protocols in the network in order to mount an attack. Without a trustworthy detection mechanism by the network management system, an attacker can continue to perform his actions, and the NMS and its administrators would just assume that the router is not compromised. Besides software, data integrity and confidentiality is not monitored either. And in particular, data is often stored in plain text and integrity is not verified on the device. This means that when accessed, it can, if it's compromised, data can compromise the actual operation of the entire router. Last, and certainly not least, telecom equipment has a very long lifespan of more than 10 years and sometimes close to 20 years. This means that existing product architectures must be able to switch to quantum-resistant algorithms when quantum computing becomes practical, or of course when regulations and standards mandate so. After introduction of trusted computing and the future TPM technology, the device management demonstrator will offer the following features. First, strong hardware-based identification. For this, we would leverage the endorsement keys and attestation key that we find in the TPM. And these will be used to make sure that every device has a unique hardware-bound identity that cannot be forged and cannot be copied. So we can always be sure that we talk to the right device. Second, we will have comprehensive integrity verification, or CIV. This is Huawei's solution for providing load time, runtime, and offline integrity for the programs, for the applications, and the data on the router. And it allows us also to have coarse-grained runtime integrity protection and detection capability for the main processes that run on the system. Based on comprehensive integrity verification and hardware identification, we will be able also to provide secure zero-touch provisioning to the routers. This means that when a router will be added to the network, there is no need to rely on a trusted operator, human operator, to configure the router or to set up trust relationships, or even worse, to do trust on first use for communicating with the router. In the precise focus of this event, we will also offer integration with quantum-resistant TPM and use of quantum-resistant algorithms in the entire stack. And based on all these four features, we will be able to provide, finally, trust-aware routing decisions so that the network management system can define the routing policy in the network based on trustworthy information and not based on simple assumptions of trust. According to the focus of this workshop, and in the interest of time, I will focus today only on the quantum-resistant crypto-related work that we have done in this demonstrator. In this slide, we are outlining the demonstrator setup with the software stack. Each component is placed in a separate virtual machine on top of a hypervisor, and these components, such as the NMS, the RA server, the routers, and a test client and web server, are communicating among themselves through virtual bridges. This virtual platform allows us to leverage the software TPM that has been, the software quantum-resistant TPM that has been implemented by one of our project partners as virtual TPM. So we would be able to validate both scenarios related to traditional telecom infrastructure, but also to virtualized infrastructure, such as, for example, NFV, or network function virtualization. These components practically behave like real routers, leveraging the TPM just like it would be a physical TPM. Here, we are summarizing the modifications that we have made to the software TPM to work in a virtualized environment. On the right side, we see the software TPM and the libTPMS components that are the backend of the virtualized software TPM. The front end is exposed in the virtual machine on the right side. One of the problems is that virtualization components assume that the maximum size of TPM commands is 4096 bytes, which is not true anymore with quantum-resistant TPMs, because the commands need to be bigger to support the longer key lengths and parameters. Thus, the components with green label have been modified to have a larger buffer to store and to transfer TPM commands and responses between the backend and the front end. In addition, components interacting with the quantum-resistant TPM, the components with orange border, also needed to be modified to use the new definition of some TPM structures. For example, some 16-bit integers have been replaced with 32-bit equivalents. Finally, OpenSSL has been modified to support quantum-resistant algorithms for non-TPM crypto operations, such as, for example, TLS channels. Here we are giving a few details into the performance evaluation of the quantum-resistant TPM. It is practically highlighting the various phases of the demonstrator lifecycle and of the router operations. And you see here the router boot time, which is when the router is loading software and software is measured and measurements recorded in the TPM, as well as a number of key creation steps, an attestation key that is used to sign measurements taken during the boot time, as well as TLS key creation for setting up trusted channels with the management. We also have a TLS connection step that we highlight, and as well the operation, the TPM operation called quote, which is reading measurements from the TPM and providing them signed for a verifier. What we can see from the numbers is that when there is intensive usage of the TPM, the time of completion of a phase is at least 3 times slower than when we use the quantum-resistant TPM. In some phases, such as the router boot, we don't have so much impact because we don't use asymmetric crypto. However, in the other phases, we have this impact. Still, we don't create keys all the time, and we don't create TLS connections all the time, so the impact is not actually as high in real life. Here, we also have a slide which shows the evaluation of TPM performance. Practically, oh, I think, yeah. Here we also see the evaluation of the quantum-resistant TPM performance compared with the TPM 2.0 according to each TPM command that we are using. What can be seen, again, the commands are listed according to the phases that I showed earlier, is that each individual command is actually on average 10 times slower with a quantum-resistant TPM. Reaching the conclusions, the lessons learned from this demonstrator are that migration from TPM 2.0 to the quantum-resistant TPM is feasible, and it is fully compatible with the system integrity use cases that we have for trusted computing. Also, the performance impact, despite being reasonably high at the individual level of the operations, it is in the entire solution reasonable, and we expect that it can only be improved with real-life implementations. Also, TPM and trusted computing are again validated as a foundation for system security, and this time in network infrastructures, and also new trust-based use cases such as trust-aware routing can be built on top of them. Last but not least, quantum resistance must be implemented across the entire trusted computing stack, from the TPM firmware itself to the crypto libraries and to the TLS connections that are used in communications. Because as we know, security is as strong as our weakest link, so therefore we need to make sure that across the entire stack we have quantum resistance. My last slide would be about a few industry thoughts about migrating to a quantum-resistant world. Huawei is a device vendor, first of all. And what I can say is that device vendors can implement quantum-resistant cryptographic standards once they will be available. However, we need to realize that long-life devices manufactured today will need to comply first with today's standards and national regulations. Still, they would need to survive in expected quantum computer times, perhaps 10 or more years later. And this while always remaining compliant to the regulations of the day. This makes so that migration path to quantum resistant cryptography is not a very easy one. The various national organizations such as the NIST, the German BSI, or the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK have put out certain migration guidelines that are useful mostly for customer organizations. However, there is not so much guidance useful for the vendors that produce devices. In the case of the vendors, we are often looking at hybrid approaches in which we would use quantum resistant cryptography as well as non-quantum resistant cryptography in a combination so that we get the best of both worlds, or at least that would be the hope. However, this is a suboptimal solution. It has cost disadvantages and it impacts the performance as well as making it more complex to manage the devices. What's most challenging, in my opinion, is to migrate the hardware-anchored roots of trust to quantum-resistant primitives. And that is because while for software, we could imagine cryptographic agility, which allows us with a software update to change the cryptographic algorithms that are used, this is not really an option for roots of trust that rely on immutable algorithms and keys practically fixed in hardware. And one of the biggest challenges that I would expect to have is how we can recover in case one of the chosen quantum resistant algorithms or its implementation is later found to be weak. And I'm referring to these hardware anchor roots of trust. So that's why I believe we need to rethink cryptographic agility into a more comprehensive concept. And I would call that cryptographic resilience, which would be the ability to change the cryptographic primitives at the lowest level of our roots of trust, at our security foundations, in case we would have the need. And with this, I conclude my part of the talk. I would invite you to follow our demonstrator after the event. It will be played as a video, and I hand over back to Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, Surrey. All right, let's see what future TPM project tell us. The project, at least from my point of view, is run at just a right time, because the quantum computer is coming, although we don't know when yet, but we believe it's coming. And post-quantum cryptography research is getting popular. And more applications from other side is more application about trusted computing devices like a TPM is also developed, and the TPM is embedded in very large number of computers. It's pretty much everywhere. Even for those computers, they are not have a specific chip called TPM, but they have different names, chip with similar functions. So that means the time is correct, but also project face a very big challenge, because quantum resistant cryptography is not yet mature, is still in a very early stage. Particularly the standardization work in this field is just the beginning, and NIST is leading this post-quantum crypto activities, but we still need to wait a few years for NIST selected the first set of algorithms. So that means we cannot wait. We have to make our actions. The project is now complete, but our work is still carry on. We actually find that there are bigger room to improve our work, including algorithms design, implementation. As Sylvia indicated, the algorithms we choose is still much slower than today's computer. So we need to improve the algorithm design and implementation. We also need to work closely with standard bodies and try to find what we can recommend to industry and the users. So for the project partners, we closely work with NIST. Some of our partners are involved in the NIST PQC computation. Some of us involved in TCG and in ISO IEC standard. The last thing is we strongly feel we need more research projects to carry on our mission. Luckily, we got a few other fundings in this field. One EU project called SIG, that is using trusted computing technology to enhance security in ICT systems. So this is another 3 years project funded by EU, and we have 14 partners from 10 different countries. We have interesting use case as well. This is including smarter manufacturing, smarter cities, smarter aerospace, and smarter satellite communications. We have another project which is recently started. This is also H2020 project called the Second, that is to build a security and a privacy solution for Internet of Things device. This is also 3 years project started on September this year. So we have 20 partners from 10 European countries. In this project, our use case is focused on healthcare security data protection. So we set up some special use case in the healthcare ecosystem. Although we have a very good research team and put a lot of efforts in this area, but we still strongly believe there are many challenges for secure computing, trusted computing, the research. So on the one side, we need to build a strong root of trust. In the other side, we need to find a right attestation service. And also we have to face challenges for trusted computing practice. Although TPM and the various trusted devices have been embedded in our computer, sitting there, but not actually many people notice them, many people use them. We need to build a lot of applications, and we also need to let the user knows how to use them. Hopefully, those applications we build, they are robust enough and they are flexible enough. Ideally, they are transparent to users. They will not have to be noticed, but they just benefit from them. I think that's all we need to talk. Thank you very much. Thank you, Surrey. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you, Professor Chen. And thank you, Silvio, online. We did get all of your slides and your voice. It worked faultlessly. So please be reassured. I know how awful it is giving a webinar to a blank screen and wondering if you've still got an audience. Just a reminder to the people online, we have about 100 viewers online, to put your questions into the Q&A. We're going to deal with Q&A at the end. We're going to have a panel session rather than do them presentation by presentation. So we've had a couple of questions already in. Keep asking questions, we'll store them up and then we can deliver them to the whole panel. For those in the audience here, write down your notes. Remember that question you were going to ask, because by the end of the presentations, you'll be wondering what you were thinking of earlier. So keep remembering those. Now for our next one, it gives me great pleasure to invite Adrian Waller from Talus. Adrian, over to you.
See if this works. Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Adrian Waller from Talus. So I'm going to give a fairly short presentation. So the main aim of this is to firstly introduce why is post-quantum cybersecurity relevant for Talus as a company, and then what have we done about it and where have we got to. And then at the end, it's a little bit into where we see the main gaps going forwards, or where we think more research and work needs to be done. So firstly, you may or may not have come across Talus, maybe you have. So we are a large multinational engineering company. So the main thing is that we make things and integrate things. We work in these areas. So the first one is digital identity and security is the most obvious area where post-quantum matters, because this is the part of the business that makes cryptographic products. And I'll give a slide on that in a minute. But all of the other areas that we work in will be significantly affected by the problems of a working quantum computer that can break the algorithms that we use today. So the main issues that we have is all of these systems that we produce for, say, defense, aerospace, etc., tend to be very long-lived. It's not unusual to have systems in place for 40 years. So if we are thinking now of building such a system, that's well within the time frame of working quantum computers, etc. So we really need to know what we're going to do about it for those. And the other big issue is that not only that, they are quite hard to change. So it's not a case of, oh, we'll just wait and see, and then we'll just swap something out and that's fine. These things, for various reasons, mainly because a lot of them are safety critical, they are hard and it's generally unwise to make a lot of changes to them. So this is definitely a pressing matter for Talus in all of these areas. Just a quick slide on the kind of the crypto products bit. So the main thing to note here is that it's very wide and varied. So we do lots of different things that range from very high performance hardware security modules and encryptors that sit in data centers, etc., down to really small things, and in particular things like SIM cards, eSIMs that sit in your mobile phones, so very varied, and how you make use of post-quantum algorithms, etc., is very different in all of these situations. So firstly, a slide on, so I'm from Talus UK Research, so based in Reading. So this slide is on what we've been doing in this area since, in fact, 2013 is when we first started working on this. Our main focus is on not developing new algorithms. So that's not the thing that we do. We're very interested in, can we use those algorithms in our products and services, etc. And in particular, this second bullet point talk about, say, industrialization of solutions. So it's not just about, oh, there's an algorithm. How do we actually implement, make use of that, and etc. in our systems, and particularly for Talus embedded systems is a real focus. So I've put a few examples of bits of work that we've done there, so just briefly mention. So as I say, since 2013, we've done quite a bit of work on analyzing different candidates for quantum safe algorithms. We had this European project, Safe Crypto, from 2015 to 2019. So in that one, we were looking at, Talus were looking at a satellite use case and making use of quantum safe IPsec. So we worked out how to do that and implement it. And we implemented, I just mentioned, a hybrid key exchange using conventional and quantum safe. The idea being that you're kind of hedging your bets in case the quantum safe algorithms turn out to be not secure. We've done some other bits of work, such as quantum safe identity-based encryption. Outside of the crypto itself, an interesting thing is this quantum threat assessment. So this is, how do you determine how much at risk are you from a quantum computer, where is it, and what might you need to do about it? So we've helped develop like an internal methodology for that. And also we are active in standards, and in particular the ETSI standards group here. and I'll talk more about that later. Just to mention that one of my colleagues is currently secretary of that working group. So in the wider Talus, I think two main things to notice. So even though we in the UK don't do algorithm development, they do in France. And one of the candidates for this NIST competition, which is the kind of the main competition for developing the algorithms that we will use that are quantum resistant. So Talus is one of the authors of one of those candidates, Falcon. And can you actually make use of post-quantum solutions in products today? So we have at least one example, which is this Lunar HSM, the box you can see there, and in the related high-speed encryptors where these stateful hash-based signatures are available as an option if you want to use them today. Okay. So that's kind of where we are. So what are the next steps or the main challenges? So people have mentioned already today, so Lee and so on have mentioned about there's a lot of work on developing these quantum resistant algorithms. The main thing is this NIST competition in the US, which although it's the US, it's really the de facto world effort in producing these algorithms. It's now reached, it's getting close to completion. I think it's still got another couple of years left, but it's reached a stage where we have some, I guess, reasonably mature algorithms in these areas, and I've just listed them up there. So it's getting close to completion. One thing I've noted at the bottom, something called that most of the algorithms are based on the same kind of underlying mathematical hard problems, so lattice-based. So a potential issue is that are we putting, say, all our eggs in one basket, and do we need a wide variety? So they do have some what they call alternate algorithms from different categories. So that may be one area, but at the moment, lattice-based seems okay. And from a Talus point of view, so we've tried out all of these algorithms probably, and certainly in a wide variety of products. And in most cases, from our application point of view, can it meet the requirements? Everything is kind of fine, really. There's no real problems, with one exception, which is my next slide. What's the main issue from the algorithm point of view? I think it's really that the digital signature algorithms have, well, relatively large signatures, and certainly compared to the algorithms that we use today. In most cases, that can be coped with, but there are a few cases where it doesn't quite meet the application requirements. So two that we're aware of in Talus. So some of the work that we did in Talus UK was on this satellite use case, and there we were looking at the command and control channel from the ground up to the satellites, and that channel has very low bandwidth. So the issue is that sending signed messages becomes much, much longer. These signature sizes make a significant difference. So we kind of worked out that it was kind of borderline acceptable with the current candidates, but it's not ideal. We noted that there is an algorithm called Bliss, which wasn't actually entered into the NIST competition, but funnily enough, met the requirements for that use case a lot better. So that is one option. Maybe that's something that should be revisited, or another alternative. And the other main area where this is a problem is for very limited processors. And here we're looking at things like SIMs and eSIMs, or very limited microcontrollers. And we have found that some of these signature candidates, in fact, in some cases, all of them can't be implemented on some of our platforms. This is because of the fact that the keys and signatures are much bigger and things don't fit in the RAM available. So there are two ways to approach this. So NIST are already aware of some of these issues, and they've has said at their last, I guess, conference that they may consider looking at algorithms with smaller signature sizes, and maybe that's a good approach. But the other way to look at it is that maybe, in fact, within the next 10 years, our hardware will improve, so this isn't a problem anyway. This is probably almost certainly the case for things like SIMs, that within the timescales that we'll need to implement some of these things, that maybe the hardware will improve, that's not a problem. But it's certainly an issue that we need to consider. So looking at a different track, so slightly away from the algorithms, looking at what's happening in the ETSI This is Cyber QSC working group. So they have a different focus. So they're not so much looking at developing algorithms, they're looking at how can we use them and what might be the issues for industry. So this fits more where I guess with Talus are mostly focused. So mainly they are kind of following the outcomes of the NIST competition, but producing standards to help us make use of those algorithms in real use cases. So some examples of some of the recent work. So previous talk mentioned migration. So there is a technical report from ETSI kind of which covers some of these issues of how do we do this thing of migrating to quantum safe. And I'll come back to that in a second at the bottom of the slide. There is some work on things like this hybrid thing. How can we do that? So if you don't fully trust the quantum resistant algorithms, what are ways to make sure we can combine them with conventional, just to give you a bit of breathing room in case there's a problem. There's some work on a wider class of algorithms that NIST are not currently looking at. So identity-based encryption in particular, which is not used a lot, but it does have some important use cases, particularly in public safety communications, which is an interest to Talus. And just note the last one that they've noted that a lot of the information around the algorithms in the NIST competition is a bit kind of hard to find, or it's not all in one place. So they produced one simple report to, if you wanted to find information on those algorithms, that's where to look. But I think the most important thing from, I guess, my and Talus' point of view, where we think there's a gap, is on this migration problem. And I was really interested to see that that was mentioned in the last talk. So some work has started. So in ETSI, they're looking at a particular use case of intelligent transport systems to try and look at what are the problems and try and work through them of how you might do it. NIST have also noted this and are starting an activity to look at this in a much more widely. So they're looking at wider use cases and what kind of tools might be helpful. And I think I would stress that this is probably the big challenge. So it's not enough to have the algorithms, but how do we actually work out, how do we make sure we change all the systems that we have in such a way that's not disruptive and so on, to migrate to those. And my last slide then, so is just to point out, it's not all about cryptography when we're thinking of quantum computing and cybersecurity. I freely admit on this next slide, if it comes up, to be in a slight state of ignorance on this topic of quantum computing more generally. But most of the interest in quantum computing is not because of cryptanalysis and cryptography, it's because of optimization problems, machine learning, etc. So obviously those we have those kind of problems in cybersecurity. I've just listed a few examples down from a defender's perspective at the bottom. So things like detecting attacks. We have like optimizing your security architectures against various criteria. At a kind of an enterprise level, there's finance, investment strategy kind of problems. And there are cryptography related problems, things like PRNG construction, or maybe even side channel analysis. So I think I'll leave this with it's an open question. Maybe there is more work on this, but I don't think it's that well known at the moment. How will that affect cybersecurity? And the real issue here for me is, I think, obviously these things can help the defenders and the attackers, but is there kind of an advantage for one or the other or not? And how do we work with that in the future? And I think that's it. So I think I'm slightly early, but maybe made up a bit of time. So
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Perfect timing, actually. Keep the questions coming in online. So those of you who are watching, keep the questions coming in. We'll catch up at the end. Those of you in the theatre, write them down so you don't forget them. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming forward now. For our next talk, I have a real pleasure to invite Professor Tim Spiller from University of York, Professor of Quantum Information Technologies. Really looking forward to this one. Tim, over to you.
Afternoon, everyone who's here and virtual. Actually, this is the second event I've been to. I went to one in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago, and it really is nice to actually go to a physical event again. what I'm going to do is give you a very quick overview of quantum technologies and the potential advantage, tell you a bit about what's going on in the UK in that, and comment a little at the end about the particular impact for security, some of which you've heard already. So there's a whole spectrum of quantum technologies. Kind of every every technology sector has the potential where there could be some advantage gained. And the fundamental feature of quantum technologies is that they utilize some fundamental feature of quantum physics, and there are different ones that underpin various of the technologies that I'll mention in a minute. And because they utilize fundamental features of quantum physics, they actually manipulate and whether it's communicate, store, process, or whatever information in a rather different way from conventional IT. And in certain cases, that means that there is a potential, if you use these properties such as superposition, entanglement, or whatever, that you can actually do something which goes beyond any capability of the analog of that information technology in the classical domain. So there are advantages that can be achieved. Not everywhere, but in some places. And so people, you may well see that the term quantum advantage referred to in some cases. So very quickly, that's certainly clicked through a few. Okay, so the first one, computing. You've already heard mention of quantum computing. The thing about quantum superposition is it means you can have many different states of a quantum system coexisting all in parallel at the same time. And so hand-wavingly, if those are states of a computer, you can process many different computations in an individual device, a quantum computer, at the same time. And if you can combine all of those parallel computations and extract something interesting at the end, then there is potential to significantly speed up, and in some cases exponentially speed up certain computations that can be done. And you've heard that there are various things that can be done. There are very positive things, simulation and modeling, and those may be done with actually relatively small quantum computers. Cryptanalysis, we'll come back to that, and you've already heard it mentioned. That's a kind of threat, if you like, in the security domain. And there's a whole host of quantum algorithms that have been devised. At the minute, where we are with the hardware is that, if you like, there isn't one winner. There isn't a particular way forward. I'm sure you've heard that Google and IBM are both working on superconducting qubits. There are other projects pursuing doing quantum computing with light. You can use other bits of condensed matter. Little defects in diamond can be used as quantum bits. So there's a whole host of different candidates, and there isn't one favorite way forward yet. And they are just at the point where they've demonstrated in certain cases and with certain problems quantum advantage. So there's still a long way before this becomes a threat. There's an awful lot of work to be done to build quantum computers big enough that that threat would become real, the cryptanalysis threat. But because of the progress and because quantum advantage has now been demonstrated, at least the threat is thought now to be real. Okay, so next thing, that was computing, sensing and measurement and things. If you take quantum states of, it might be light, it might be matter, then you can potentially image or sense things more accurately than you can do with the same kind of device if it's just a conventional device. So that might be imaging. You might be able to image things with greater precision, or you might be able to sense things such as gravity. So people, oops, come on. Yes, okay. So in the sensing case, you know, this example here, if you've actually got some resource where two light states, photons or whatever, are entangled, if you bounce one of them off an object and then recombine, you may be able to resolve things about that object more accurately than you could in if you were using that light, if it's light, in conventional resources. And people have thought, so probably light and atoms are the main candidates for this. You would use light if it's imaging. You might use atoms if you're trying to sense gravitational field variations and things like that. But you also might have little nanomechanical devices that vibrate that could be used to sense other external fields, such as electric, magnetic fields, or so on. So the message is that there could be a quantum advantage in sensing and imaging from constructing new devices there. So the one I'm really interested in, and it's the one that I work on mostly these days, is communications. And the idea there that is if one sends quantum signals from the usual two people, Alice and Bob, if one sends quantum signals, then if anyone tries to intercept those, the other fundamental feature of quantum physics that kicks in is that there will be an irreversible disturbance. And that's not just because they're a bit clumsy, that's built into nature. So that's not avoidable even in the future. That's a fundamental part of quantum physics. And so you can kind of see that if Alice sends quantum things to Bob, anyone happens to have a look in the middle, then they will introduce disturbance. So you can know that that interaction has happened. And the quantum medium that we use for quantum communications is light. It doesn't necessarily have to be down optical fibers, although a lot of it is. It could well be through free space. And I'll briefly mention both of those. So that's a very quick tour of quantum technologies. Because of the potential, in 2013, the UK government decided to start a whole national program. So I'm not going to talk through quite a few of these slides in detail, but I just want to illustrate for you that in 2013, there was a big investment made in the UK, which involved very many activities. But if you like, the centerpiece that was set up at that time were 4 technology hubs that would pursue technology development in the relevant areas of quantum technology. So that program was started in 2014. The initial investment was about 270 million from UK government, and that was augmented with various other bits and pieces. And then there was a renewal of the program from 2019 to 2024 with further government money and also a significant proportion now of industry-funded projects through Innovate UK, where industry makes a significant contribution. And the rough figure now is that over a 10-year period, there's been an investment of about £1 billion. That's including the industry contributions as well as UK government. So it's a very substantial effort. And as I said, the centerpiece is in the technology development is really the 4 hubs that were formed. And they cover pretty much all the technology sectors that I mentioned. So there's one that basically works on sensors and timing and mostly uses atoms, and that's led by the University of Birmingham. There's one that works on imaging. So clearly they use light. That's led by the University of Glasgow. There's a computing and simulation hub. And in the first phase, they focused mainly on ion trapping, but they've now diversified and they include other platforms, including superconducting qubits and so on. And now, if you like, they now have an outlet because there is also a new National Quantum Computing Centre that's being built at Harwell near Oxford. So that will be a physical building. And if you like, that will be one tech transfer route for the computing and simulation hub. And then there's the quantum communications hub, which deals with secure communications in the quantum world. And that's the thing I lead from York. So those are the 4 hubs. I just wanted to show you this. Each hub will show you a very similar picture. So when I talk about a hub led by the University of York, we have 10 of the order of 10 university partners across the UK. We have numerous industry partners and national laboratories and so on. And so each of the 4 hubs has focused the UK expertise, no matter where it is, into a large distributed project. And so in our case, these are all our partners who are working with us on quantum communications. And most of what we've done actually over the period of since we started 2014 has focused on one thing, if you like, which is the most mature quantum comms technology at the minute, which is quantum key distribution. And what quantum key distribution enables is that it enables secure sharing of a key between 2 parties. And as I say, the hint that you can do something like that is that if Alice sends quantum things to Bob and someone has a look in the middle, there is a guarantee that some of those quantum signals will be disturbed. And there's a very clever protocol based on that, whereby Alice and Bob can then exchange ordinary information, which doesn't have to be secured, and they can develop a shared secret key between them. And once they've got this key, it can clearly be used as ordinary symmetric keys for whatever application you can use symmetric keys for. That's fine. The one thing I should stress is that quantum key distribution does need some authentication. It cannot bootstrap itself from nothing. So if Alice and Bob have never met before, then something has to be used to authenticate. And so perhaps it should have been called quantum key expansion, but in the end, quantum key distribution was the phrase that won. So there has to be some authentication as well, which might be through some pre-shared key, but it may well involve collaboration, if you like, with use of post-quantum cryptography or quantum safe cryptography. And so, but if you combine those two, as I'll comment, then I think that's the way forward for quantum safe communications in the long term. Okay, so I'll just highlight a couple of things. So in the first 5 years of the hub, which ran from 2014 to 2019, we pursued many parallel projects, if you like, and I'll just highlight some that are particularly relevant for security. So we've built in the UK the first quantum network, and I stress that this is a network of trusted nodes. So there are quantum key distribution links between points that you have to trust. So the guarantee is you can detect eavesdropping between these trusted points, but at the trusted points you have to have conventional and physical security. And so we've got a network around Bristol, one around Cambridge. We've got a link from Cambridge to BT's Adastral Park R&D headquarters, and we're using bits of the National Dark Fiber facility to actually construct a link between Bristol and Cambridge as well. So that's one thing we did. We've pursued small handheld devices that have the potential to have a quantum transmitter in your phone of the future and a quantum receiver in the wall. And so that work is now quite mature as well. We put stuff on chip. So some of our partners are focused on, with a view to future commercialization, putting both quantum transmitters and receivers on chip. And there was a spin out that came during phase 1 from our partner at the University of Bristol called KETS, that's focused on putting quantum comms stuff on chip. We also participate in standards work. That's already been mentioned. There is a parallel ETSI standards working group on quantum key distribution, and hub partners have been actively involved in that for many years now. So that's a bit of a snapshot of what we've done over the past 5 years. And then moving on from that, moving on from that, we're now in what's called phase 2 of the UK national programme, which is 2019 to 2024. And we're continuing a lot of the work that we've done in phase 1. In particular, we're expanding our network, and we're looking about combining within that network quantum key distribution and post-quantum cryptography. We're doing further work on standards, more work on chip-based stuff. The handheld work is maturing. We're looking, if you like, people have used the phrase, in the future there could be a quantum internet. There's an awful long way to go before that, but taking some first steps towards that. One thing that you would absolutely need before you can do anything distributed in quantum is to be able to distribute quantum entanglement in a reliable way. And so we've done some significant progress on that. Probably the biggest thing that we're doing in phase 2 is that we're looking at a demonstration to do quantum key exchange between a small satellite and a ground station. Because in the future, if you want to get worldwide with quantum communications, then satellite would seem to be a very good way to do it, in that you can do an exchange in one place, you can let the satellite go elsewhere, and then do another exchange. In that model, you'd have to trust the satellite, but nevertheless, that seems pretty much the only way you're going to get quantum signals from one side of the world to the other. So that gives you a very brief overview of what we're doing in the hub. And I just want to close with some comments about the particular impact for information security. So you've already heard about the threat from quantum computing, and at what point should one worry about that? Well, if you're sending encrypted data around at the minute that could be vulnerable when a quantum computer comes along, then you should be worried now if the security shelf life and the retooling time for your secure hardware, if the sum of those two things actually exceeds the time to Google or whoever producing a large quantum computer, then maybe you need to be worried now about that. So we know about the quantum threat, and when that actually kicks in, I think depends on how long you want your information to be secure. I've mentioned very briefly new quantum sensors. They'll enable us to detect and image things more accurately than we can at the minute. But despite both of these two things, then there are, and as I said, quantum key distribution is the most advanced. There are now quantum means that are resistant with a guarantee to both of these. So no matter what the adversary or eavesdropper has in the future to throw at you, if you use quantum key distribution, modulo the authentication matter that I mentioned, then you have a guarantee that you are proof against these two things. Now, we've heard quite a lot about the new mathematical techniques, the mathematical algorithms that are certainly immune to Shor's algorithm, which is the main threat at the minute up here, but are thought to be immune to algorithms that might emerge as well, although it was noted that everything seems to be focusing on lattice-based approaches, which might concern me because presumably Peter Shor and all his buddies are also now thinking about that would be the appropriate place to develop a new algorithm. So I think it would be good to have a basket of algorithms, which I know the NIST process is developing, so that we will have potential immunity to just one new algorithm in the quantum domain period. But anyway, the fact is, I think that because we have both of these capabilities, then the way forward may well mean that we combine the two of them to future quantum safe communications. So I'm going to stop there, and if I could put up a last slide. If people are interested in further reading, there are various links there, and I'm happy for these slides to be shared as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for coping with the microphone. I hope people got online got the the presentation that Tim gave. Certainly, after the first few minutes we did, so that's great. Keep the questions coming in. We've got some interesting questions starting to appear. Keep the questions here. So this is the point where we go to Q&A. And for that, I'd like to re-invite the panel, both online. I'm hoping we can assemble the online panel. If not, we have three real-world panelists. So Tim, Lee, and Adrian, if you want to grab a chair over there. Social distancing is making this a slightly challenging prospect. Space your chairs out to your comfort level. You heard each other's presentations. We've got several questions coming in online. We'll hope to do the demo from the talk from Ali at the end if we can re-establish. The question is whether we can establish any of our online panel as well. If not, we'll proceed here. Well, let's just crack on and hope the technical glitches sort themselves out. I mean, one of the things that occurred to me seeing your presentations was that there was an awful lot of work to do, and in potentially a relatively short space of time, with the likes of Google, IBM promising million qubit computers by the end of the decade, whether you think that's realistic or not. When do you think the effects of quantum vulnerabilities will actually start to be felt? I'll go to our real world panel first. I see we've got the online panel. I'm hoping that they can hear us. If you could raise your hand when you want to talk, just so I can keep it coordinated. Lee, you were first off the mark.
I
Far
think
away.
the time is now. It's not anywhere later. Like Tim mentioned, if you have data, you encrypt it, and today we don't have a large scalable quantum computer be able to break your data, but your data is publicly available anyway. So if anybody collect your data, I don't want to say who, but they can later on they can break your data. That's the one thing. The other thing from my point of view is people lost the trust. The trust is very important for cybersecurity because the quantum computer will coming one day, and if we don't do anything, and then the trust in cybersecurity will be lost. If nobody trusts us, then we kind of lost. So that's why I think a threat is there already.
So the time is now, and people have
Time
been
is
talking
now,
about
not later. Yeah.
the problem of acquiring encrypted records now, with the view that in years to come they will be able to decrypt them and sort of do reverse attacks, and that being done by some governments in the world. This was done as far back as the Second World War, where we and others were acquiring records, and then with the intent of being able to decrypt them in the future, it becomes quite a vulnerability. So, okay. Tim, Adrian, any comments on that?
I would just endorse that. I mean, I think it's very hard to predict when a quantum computer will emerge. On my slide, I mentioned Mike Mosca at Waterloo in Canada, who's come up with that inequality. I think he has tried to make estimates of probabilities of a large quantum computer existing in 10 or 20 years. And so then, you know, that those probabilities are not small, but they're not one either. But then you've got to ask the question, how worried are you about the long-term security? You know, if it's very sensitive information at the minute, then I think you should be concerned. If it's something that will be redundant in a couple of years' time, if exposed at that point, then clearly you don't care yet. But I think the threat is now sufficiently big that if it's important data that you want to keep secure for a long time, I think the threat exists now.
So there's an interesting subtlety to that, which are who are likely to be the first users of large-scale workable quantum computers, and they're likely to be few in number. I don't want to repeat the sort of the IBM only needs 5 computers sort of mistake, but the first high qubit working quantum computers are likely to be owned by governments or very large IT corporates. So there won't be many of them around initially. So that kind of shapes of, you know, where the problem is going to come from. It's not going to be the kind of thing that the average bedroom hacker has access to. One imagines.
Probably not, but there will be lots of steps before that where modest-sized machines that are useful for research purposes or perhaps running optimization algorithms and that exist. And then, of course, if you can network those together, you end up with a bigger, more powerful machine. So I agree. It's likely the very big ones are likely to be owned by governments or whatever first, but there may be other ones out there at more modest scale that might still play a role.
Adrian, any thoughts to add to that? And then I'll come to our online panel, see whether we can get that working.
Just to add that people talking about encryption, but the problem is not just encryption, even now. And it was mentioned in one of the talks about the roots of trust and so on. So certainly for things like in our safety critical systems that last a long time, you know, again, we need to be thinking about this now, and we are thinking about it now, which is a good thing. So it shouldn't go away with just thinking, oh, I don't encrypt stuff, I'm not worried about long-term encryption, therefore I'm okay. I think this is a general problem for anyone who uses cryptography, really.
So we're hearing a very clear and resounding now is the problem. We'll come on to the what. What can people do about it? Let's go to the online panel, see whether we can get any of them talking. I can't control this, so if one of you wants to make a comment, can you raise your hand just so I can get our audio people to make sure that you're audible? Anyone want to make a comment? Silvio.
At least from our perspective, it is the right time to look at this, not only from the algorithm perspective, but really for how we can prepare to adopt these algorithms in our systems. And indeed, one of the points I made was that roots of trust produced today need to be resistant tomorrow, but also roots of trust from tomorrow need to be resistant for even longer time. So it's incredibly hard to make this transition and to make the decision on which algorithms to use. And I guess once we would have some standards, I still hope we will have some time before quantum computers are indeed a threat that would allow us this time to make sure that we know how to adopt the algorithms correctly. So yeah, I think we need a lot of time, and the time is right now.
Go to Ali. You were going to make a point. Let's see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, I said I had technical issues at the beginning, so I couldn't hear the question. If you could please repeat it, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Okay, so this is about when do we need to start worrying about the impact of quantum computing on the world of cryptography, cybersecurity, and so forth?
Sure. I mean, NSA started worrying since 2015, right, when they made the announcement about the quantum threat being a real threat and asking NIST to follow with a standardization process for post-quantum cryptography. So I think that we kind of like identified this as a community cybersecurity cryptography, that it is a real threat, given as panelists already mentioned that the long lifespan of some of our sensitive data, that we need to get ready for it. So I think that we kind of like all agreed on this, and NIST is about to announce the actual standards by the end of the year. I think that the question now is for people and for large corporates and all stakeholders, how to get ready for or how to transition to the new standards. And that is a challenging task and challenging phase. A lot of people don't know where to start from because I guess nobody remembers last time when we had to change all the public key cryptography, because we never had to. And it's the first time that we're changing all the public key cryptography layer in our cybersecurity. And when we started, it was largely, for communications and between governments, etc. And now you have cryptography literally everywhere. And public key cryptography in particular is, in your bank card, in your car key, literally everywhere. So I think that the real challenge now is the transition phase and the preparation for like putting roadmap for transition to post-quantum cryptography. I heard also panelists talking about QKD and the likes. I think that it has niche application, and it will be used where it is suitable. It's not a replacement of public key cryptography for many reasons, but I could see them working together in the near future, I guess.
Thank you, Ali. Roberto, so a new member of the panel, part of the Huawei team. What are your views on whether we need to worry? So far, we've got 5 votes in as now. What are your views?
So in my opinion, we should start to worry about it now because there are many aspects of the transition from non-quantum computer to quantum computer, and one of these is also the technical problem because we have the experience from the Future TPM project that it's not immediate to integrate a quantum resistant algorithm into the current software. So we experience a number of challenges, and so when we want to predict the transition time from non-quantum computer to quantum computer, we also need to consider the effort for adapting the software. This is from my personal experience.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to come back to the real panel and do the what. And as Tim pointed out, you know, we're worried about largely one particular form of attack in the Shor algorithm, but as Tim pointed out, there's nothing to stop additional clever mathematicians coming along and designing new algorithms that are going to threaten other parts of the cryptographic world. But getting to the question of what should we do? So in practical terms, given the scale of some of the technical challenges that we've talked about, we've alluded to this afternoon, what can our audience, who are largely security experts, who are working in large enterprises and starting to worry about this as a potential threat of the future, people have, those who've been around for a few years will remember Y2K. People are talking about Q2K now, and that we've got a few years grace, but what can we do practically now? Adrian, do you have a view on that? Put you on the spot.
Definitely, the first thing to do is this kind of thorough quantum threat assessment. I kind of mentioned this briefly in my talk, but this is to highlight to everyone in your organizations what would be the actual risk if you know, a working quantum computer was available and the algorithms you're relying on become, you know, insecure. And I think the first thing that will become apparent is how embedded now cryptography is in everything that we do. So if you did this kind of thorough assessment, you'd find that, you know, pretty much everything that you're currently relying on would become a problem, and that should be a red flag, you know, for your organization to say that, yeah, we really need to start really thinking about this. It's not just you know, like the Y2K in some sense maybe was, you know, overhyped, but if you consider what the issues are for this, then yeah, I think that would highlight why it's really a problem.
Thanks, Adrian. Tim, do you have any advice?
No, I think I'll just endorse that. I mean, I think the most important thing is to do an assessment at the minute, and clearly the post-quantum options will be decided relatively soon. And then with a longer term view, I think it may well be quantum solutions as well that can offer some help. Maybe they will be applied in certain cases in the first instance. I mean, the technology is still quite expensive, so it's not something that I think could be very widely deployed now, but you know, service providers like BT are now running trials of this for certain cases. So I think there will be an offering in that direction from you know, industry soon, and so then it may be a matter of actually looking at what the options are, but certainly in the short term it seems people should be looking at the PQC options.
Because these aren't quick transitions, are they?
No.
Not when they're rooted in from TPNs to switches to, you know, the whole infrastructure has potentially got to be looked at. And it's not something we can do overnight. It's going to take years to ripple through.
That's certainly true.
Yeah.
But as I say, I think it's worth, it is interesting now that the big service providers are now becoming aware of quantum solutions and trialing them and looking at them.
Thank you. Lee, any afterthoughts on that?
Yeah, I only want to add one thing is I think the whole industry should be working together, but actually now industry is working together. It's take time like everyone else said. For TPM as an example, the original TPM design take many years, and the transfer from ISA to elliptic curve also take many years. Now TPM, the specification designs are over 20 years. but the use TPM is just started. So for transfer this to the quantum resistant, I expected many years is necessary. But now the good thing is the industry already noticed that, the research community is also noticed that. So that's a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Well, I'm going to ask the same question to our online panel in the same order, just so that we know. What can people do? What should the experts be do? Sylvia, if I can come to you first.
Actually, that's a wonderful question, and it's a question I've been asking myself as well, and trying to make other experts also ask themselves. Just imagine that it's not about the switch to quantum resistance, but imagine that tomorrow somebody publishes a catastrophic vulnerability in RSA or in ECC, and we have lots of devices out there in the field which you will not be able to just update, even if we would have an let's say a replacement algorithm, simply because at their most fundamental level, these algorithms are burned in hardware. For example, for securely booting their firmware, there's always a key in the boot ROM and some code which is fixed, and you will not be able to update that. So that means you're vulnerable, and that's not related to quantum computers at all. It can happen for any other algorithms, and it can happen even after we might have standardized some quantum resistant algorithms as well. So what I believe we need to do is to think how we can find ways to allow us to change the crypto primitives from their most fundamental level in devices, and have the ability to change them perhaps to some algorithms that are not yet known or not yet standardized at the time when the devices are produced. And if we would find ways to do this, and perhaps do it by relying on rather simpler cryptographic primitives that have the chance to withstand also, let's say, attacks that we would be expecting, then that would give us a chance to migrate. Yeah. So, for example, we have today some initial standards around quantum resistant crypto, which are not NIST standards, they are IETF standards, and they rely on XMSS, extendable Merkle signatures. And for example, they are relying in the end on hash functions. They are very simple constructions. Can we use such algorithms to allow us to migrate other algorithms in the stack in the future? Can we do something that would allow us to change even those devices out there in the field that cannot be changed easily? I think that's the kind of thinking we should have.
Thank you. Thank you. Ali, PQ Shield, you started this company with some of these answers to these questions in mind. What are your thoughts on what we should be doing?
Yeah, great question, actually. I mean, as a company heavily involved in the NIST standardization process, and building products and software and hardware and communication and encrypted messaging, etc. I think that we've seen a great change in terms of, people that we were talking to in 2018 were asking, okay, so what is post-quantum crypto and why do we need it? And now there are actual customers and partners that are trying and post-quantum crypto in software and in hardware, as in FPGAs, and have clear roadmaps for silicon. So people are aware of this threat, and they're putting roadmaps for this. They understand if they are designing a product that is gonna go out to market in 3-4 years and stay there for 15-20 years, then they need to do the preparation now, and they need to take post-quantum crypto into consideration now. So I think that things have changed a lot, and people are a lot more aware of the quantum threat. We struggled a lot explaining to people the difference between post-quantum crypto and QKD and QRNG, and it's a lucky and unlucky field because there is lots of hype around quantum computing, and but I think that we've moved a long way now, and people are following NIST and the standardization process, etc. I don't think that we can do everything. Like, I mean, I heard our friend mentioning how can we do, risk mitigation. I think that there's no ideal solution. I mean, we have some sort of risk assessments, and cryptography is just a tool to mitigate the risk. Can we just bring it to zero? It's impossible. There will always be attacks and vulnerabilities. They come together. Software and hardware will come with vulnerabilities. Even when it comes to QKD and quantum computing and everything around it, we've learned this. There's no perfect solution. When you deploy it in the field, it's impossible for it to be perfect. There will be ways to go around it. And what we're doing here, and in terms of cryptography, is to use the best tools that we've got. Now, we know that RSA is effectively broken. Elliptic curve crypto is effectively broken. We should not stick to these two algorithms for long. We should just move to something that we know that it's not broken. We don't know of any algorithm that can break it. But that's the best that we can do now, I guess. As I said, stakeholders already moving to put clear roadmaps for transition to post-quantum crypto.
I'm going to come to our audience for our next question in a minute, but before we do that, I wanted to give Roberto a chance for any additional insights on what's already been said about what we should do next. Over to you, Roberto.
Yes, from my point of view, one of the problems is this long time for standardization, which is absolutely needed because we need to be sure that the algorithms that would be standardized are secure. But from the software point of view, if tomorrow the standardization body said the algorithm is ready, we still need to integrate them. So in my opinion, one way to reduce the time for the migration would be to do experience with the version of the algorithm that we have now, that maybe they are closer to the final version, maybe not, but they are closer than the RSA algorithm, for example. So when we integrate a quantum instant algorithm into the TPM, for example, we see that the storage needs to be increased. And so if we make experience with the current version of the algorithm, then later it will be easier for us to enhance the software with the final version of the algorithm.
Roberto. So a chance for any of those burning questions in the audience. Anyone want to ask the panel a question? Raise your hand and shout loudly. Everyone's looking quiet. I shall refer back to my online audience who are busily putting in questions. This question about how long things might take to both correct for the perceived threat. But I've got a question here, which is, we talk about QR crypto algorithms. Are we able to robustly test them, and how long will they be resistant for? And is that an impossible question to answer? It's kind of related to some of the questions that were asked, some of the points that were made earlier. Any views on that? The sort of testing regimes, what can we do to make sure that the resistant candidates that we're playing with stand the test of time? Or should we just give up on that concept?
No, we will not give up. The test means a lot of different aspects. Like NIST have PQC, the activities. They don't want to say this is a competition, but actually is a competition. The testing is let the whole cryptographic community to attack it, to attack all the algorithms. And if they if they can survive from those various attacks, and they have been tested. Yeah. And then also we have some performance testing like Roberta and Sylvia's doing in those performance evaluation, and to testing how good, how bad, if they are implemented in the real world. Those are the testing from my point of view.
Tim, Adrian, any additional thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, clearly the threat at the minute is Shor's algorithm, but the unknown is, are there other algorithms which might be devised in the future that clearly have to utilize quantum parallelism in some way, like Shor's algorithm does. I think to get that speed up, it's going to have to do that. But that's an unknown. But clearly, you know, a candidate doesn't even become a candidate if it's not already presumably tried and tested against Shor's algorithm. And so I think those who are expert in the mathematics have reason for thinking that there will be robustness of these algorithms that are being devised against quantum attacks, but there's no proof. I think it will be very hard to prove that somebody can't devise another algorithm in the future. But I think there are mathematical underpinnings that make people have confidence that these algorithms will at least stand some test of time, certainly against Shor-like algorithms, if there was something that was utilizing quantum parallelism in a similar way. But I'm not aware that there's any proof.
So forgive the pun, but we might be entering a sort of period of cryptographic uncertainty in the future. Adrian.
Yeah, but just to add to that, that we've always been in a situation of cryptographic uncertainty, that there's nothing different here. I think the key thing is that, you know, as Leah said, that to the best of the techniques that we know today, these algorithms have been thoroughly tested, and then we'll be in a situation, as we are with our current algorithms, of maybe someone comes up with a new clever method, but that's something that we've lived with for many years and will continue to live with.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to our online panel. Any thoughts on the question? I'm hoping you're hearing the answer and the questions. I'll go around again. If you don't want to answer, just say so. Sylvia, any thoughts on this?
I guess just 2 comments from my side. Testing is of course important, especially because these algorithms did not benefit from the extended timelines that cryptanalysis had at disposal for other algorithms in the past. And second, let's not forget that besides the algorithm itself, very often problems are found in implementations. And there is always the challenge of deciding when an implementation is sufficiently good. That's let's say general software related challenge, and we need to reach a point where we have sufficiently good implementations available easily and openly so that people can use them with confidence. So yeah, testing also the implementation is very important.
Ali, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I think that testing never stops, right? Once we have enough level of confidence, you start using crypto systems, but testing really never stops. I mean, one of the oldest crypto libraries is OpenSSL, and we still, every couple of years, have a devastating flaw there, right? Although probably all software engineers and cryptographers have looked at it at some point in their career. So testing really never stops. And as they clearly mentioned, that it's also about the implementation. Once you implement things, then I mean, there are the cryptanalysis that happens at an algorithmic level and mathematical level, and there is there are the bugs and the implementation flaws and attacks that attack the implementation. And this is a full range of attacks. I think that confidence in the mathematical foundation is strong enough to believe that the likes of Shor algorithm will not apply to it, and that's a mathematical thing. We know that RSA and discrete logarithm problem come from one family of mathematical problems, and that for instance, lattice problems come, they don't belong to that family. And so far, since 1996, all quantum computing people didn't manage to find I mean, not just for cryptography. It's not like we've had I don't know 100 quantum algorithms so far. It's really difficult to build a quantum algorithm that where you can actually take advantage of all the nice features that not just the parallelism but also the quantum interference, etc., so that you can actually build something that is faster than classical algorithms. It's really challenging and difficult. But I think that what comes with testing is the crypto agility. Like, you need to be crypto agile that when you want to tune the parameters because of the advances in cryptanalysis, which is going to be expected, that this is something possible in software. So that's the best way to handle this, I guess.
Thank you. Roberto, any additional insights on that?
Yes, I add something on top of what Ali said, that we need to keep a margin when we implemented the quantum recent algorithm, in the sense that, for example, if we expect the size of the key to be a certain amount, we need to maybe make room for a bigger key, because maybe at some point we discover that with this size the algorithm of the key, the algorithm is vulnerable. But if we have enough room in the chip, then we can switch to a more resistant version of the algorithm, and could be fine. Could be a mitigation.
I'm conscious of time. We're running up against the 6 o'clock completion time that we promised. I've got some great questions still from the online community, and I'm hoping that perhaps we can deal with those afterwards. We can ask our panelists to respond to some of them. So one perhaps for the cyber specialists I rather like is, do we foresee cyber security becoming less about human behavior and more about attacks and networks and deep machine and AI and so on? So really focusing on the deep guts of the security infrastructure rather than the weak human side of it. I like that question. Perhaps it deserves longer than we've got to discuss that. Some other questions about hybrid computing using quantum and conventional computing, large amounts of question about large amounts of computing and applications being commoditized. Do we see quantum as a service being something that perhaps the bad guys will have access to? And some other questions around that. So some great questions coming in online. But I think we should draw stumps there. I have promised, or we have promised our online community a demonstration from Roberto and his colleagues at Huawei. So for the online audience, stay around. For the real world audience, you're invited to our networking opportunity. You get to have real cups of whatever we've provided, and tea and biscuits and everything else. I'd like to thank our real world panel and our online panel, to Lee, Tim and Adrian, to Silvio, Ali and Roberto in the conventional way. So a round of applause, and I hope the people at online are doing the same. So thank you very much. So that brings to an end this seminar from our Future of Cyber series. This is something that we run about every quarter. We're trying to look forward into, get away from thinking about cybersecurity in terms of what's the current problem, the problem over the next few months, and start to think about the kind of issues that might face us in years to come. And that's the cybersecurity of the post-quantum world is a real example of that. For our next one, which we plan around late January, early February, we're going to be looking at some of the research that we've done in the cybersecurity team and some of our external speakers around social media and the impact of social media in the long term, some of the impact that we've already seen in things like mental health, in the political world and so on. So a great can of worms to be opened there, and we hope we can entertain you with that. And we hope to again involve the SASIG, who have been a fantastic partner of this. and I hope this joint endeavour between the university and the SASIG. So I'd like to give my thanks to SASIG, and then finally to the tech team who've had the challenge of dealing with a hybrid event, joint event with hybrid, with real world presenters and online presenters. It's not easy, and we're feeling our way on this. So apologies for any glitches, but I think they did magnificently. Thank you all, and join us after the event. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to this presentation. My name is Roberto Sasso, I'm from Huawei, and today I would like to present to you the result of the device management use case. First, I will give an overview of the use case. Then I will describe more in detail the technology and functionality of the demonstrator. Then I will provide the result of the evaluation of the TPM performance and KPI. And lastly, I will go to the conclusion. The device management use case is about managing a network infrastructure composed of network elements such as routers, a network management system or NMS, and endpoints such as laptops and servers. In this network infrastructure, the NMS queries periodically the router to obtain their status and sends configuration command in order to respond to certain events, for example, when a router becomes offline. We need the future TPM project in order to solve some issues that affect especially scenario where there is no hardware-based protection. In particular, we would like to address a weak device identification because the device key is stored in the device storage unprotected, and we would like to address the fact that the software integrity is not monitored, and a compromised router, for example, could ignore management commands sent by the NMS, and an attacker can continue to perform his action without being detected. We would also like to address the fact that the data integrity and confidentiality is not monitored, and that data is often stored in plain text and can be accessed also when the device is compromised. Lastly, since telco equipment have very long lifespan, greater than 10 years, with this project we would like to be able to migrate from non-QAR algorithms to QAR algorithms when quantum computing becomes practical. In this presentation, we will show the new network management solution fulfilling the strong security requirement defined in WP1. We would like also to show the advanced technology at operating system level for remote attestation, the virtualization components that are required to work with the QAR TPM, and the software TPM. The device management demonstrator addresses the weakness that I previously mentioned, in particular provides strong hardware-based identification, continuously monitoring of system and data integrity, provides a secure zero-touch provisioning, integration with the QAR TPM and use of quantum-resistant algorithm, and provides trust-aware routing decision. A common issue in network management is that the key for the identification is storage in the device storage unprotected, and it's easy to move this key to another device to impersonate a legitimate one. The TPM solves this issue because the key cannot leave the TPM in plain text and are bound to a specific TPM. Usually the TPM is soldered in the main board and cannot be moved simply to another device. The TPM also can be uniquely identified by its endorsement key, which is certified by the TPM vendor, and the certificate is available via offline mechanisms such as email. We would like to protect and detect system integrity. In particular, we are interested in three aspects. Low-time integrity, so we would like to ensure that the code and configuration file of the application are the right one when a process is started. We would also like to monitor the process interaction and to ensure that the mutable files are updated by the legitimate ones. And we would like to detect malicious modification between reboots when the integrity protection is not enabled. Compressive integrity verification, or CIV, is the solution that allows us to protect these three aspects of the integrity. In particular, it's built on top of the kernel security subsystem, integrity measurement architecture, and extended verification modules, and consists of a set of 3 extensions for the Linux kernel, IMA digest list for the load time integrity, InfoFlow LSM for the runtime integrity, and DPM with a TPM key for offline integrity. CRV provides a more complete protection and detection of the integrity of the application because it does not only monitor regular file, but also all the process communication channels such as FIFO and socket. It also provides a simplified integration of remote attestation into existing product, because with the CRV, the attestation can be done by simply trying to establish a trusted channel. CRV uses the TPM in order to protect a TLS key for device identification and for remote attestation of the router. It follows the trusted computing principle of measure before load for all the components that are involved during the boot process, and if all the measured components are the same of the components included in the sealing policy when the key was created, then the TPM allows the key to be unsealed. The sealing policy is first verified by the array server, and after that, a certificate for the TLS key is issued by the NMS. This slide shows the difference between a good router and a compromised router. In the first case, since all the components are the legitimate one, the TPM allows the unsealing of the TLS key, and then the router can establish a TLS connection with an NMS. In the second case, since the one components were tampered with by an attacker, the TPM didn't allow the router to guess the TLS key and cannot establish a TLS connection with an NMS. The NMS found that the router is compromised. The demonstrator offers also secure zero-touch provisioning, which is particularly effective because it avoids to place trust in the network operator for the correct configuration of the router in the initial phase. The router are admitted to the network only if they have a valid certificate, and they are configured to get the certificate at the first boot. The router can get a certificate only if their current configuration matches the one defined by the network administrator. And after the router gets the certificate, any change from the verified configuration causes the unsealing of the TLS key to fail. If a malicious network operator tries to subvert a router before or after the router gets a certificate, the NMS will notice it because the enrollment or the TLS connection fails. In this slide, we show which component we had to modify in order to use the software TPM in a virtualized environment. On the left side, we see that we replaced the TSS with the QRTSS in order to do the software TPM provisioning when the virtual machine is created. We also modify the components between the QRTPM in the center and the endpoint in the right side in the virtual machine, and those are represented with a green label, because the components have a limitation for the buffer to store the TPM commands, and this limitation is 4096 bytes. But with QR algorithms, we need a bigger buffer because QR keys are bigger. We also modified the endpoints of the communication with the QRTPM, and these are represented with the orange border, because we had to use an updated definition for some TCG structure. Finally, we are also using a modified version of OpenSL with support for quantum-resistant algorithms for non-TPM crypto operations. In this slide, we show the setup of the demo. Each component is placed in a separate virtual machine, and the virtual machine can communicate between themselves with virtual bridges which are created in the host. Now we can proceed with the demonstration of the user stories. The network administrator wants to restrict access to the network infrastructure only to the router that he controls. Since the router can be uniquely identified from the endorsement key credential, he gets the endorsement key credential from the device itself or from the TPM vendor via email, and then upload these certificates to the NMS, and the NMS stores them in a database. we can perform the registration of the router directly in the graphical interface of the NMS. So this is the dashboard, and currently in the list of router there are no router registered. So we will go to the console of the network administrator, which previously fetched the endorsement key credential of the router, and creates a zip file of this endorsement key credential. Then the network administrator uploads the certificate to the NMS dashboard. And we can see now that there are 4 new routers registered, but at the moment we didn't attest them. Then the network administrator can proceed to the definition of the trusted routing policy, and in particular assigns for each possible result of the integrity evaluation a cost for the routing table. The higher the cost, the less likely is that a router is chosen for the delivery of the packets. Then the network operator connects the router to the network, and this is when the secure zero-touch provisioning is activated. In the first part of the user story, the router creates an attestation key and sends it to the array server. The array server first verifies that the TPM of the router is a genuine one, and if it is true, issue a certificate for the attestation key. In the second part of the user stories, the router generates a TLS key and associate it to the current software configuration, and certify this TLS key with the attestation key that it previously generated, and send both the TLS key and the CSR containing this key to the array server. The array server verifies the key policy by comparing the software configuration with a list of reference values for files in the router image which are assigned by the vendor. If the verification of the key policy is successful, the array server asks the NMS to issue a certificate for the TLS key of the router and send it to the router. To demonstrate this user story, we go to the console of the network operator and we start a script to connect to the routers in the virtual machine and to initiate the secure zero-touch provisioning. We can see now in the dashboard that there are 4 new endorsement key credentials allowed, but the corresponding router didn't do yet the secure zero-touch provisioning as shown here. We can see in the bottom part of in the left side also the log of the software TPM of router 1, and we will see the TPM commands executing during the secure zero-touch provisioning. Now we will start the script. And we will see the list of TPM commands executed. For example, we see that this command cc certify is executed when the generated TLS key is certified with the attestation key. And also we see the cc sign command that is executed in order to sign the certificate signing request with the TLS key, and before it is sent to the array server. Now the secure zero-touch provisioning is complete for all the router, and we refresh the web page. And now we see that the router claim the endorsement key credential, and all the routers successfully completed the attestation, and they have a valid TLS certificate. Now the network administrator is able to monitor the overall state of the network infrastructure because each router now has a key and a TLS key certificate. So the NMS periodically tries to establish a TLS connection with the router, and if the configuration of the router is the verified one, the TPM allows the sealing of the TLS key and allows the router to continue the TLS protocol. If the configuration, the current configuration of the router is not the correct one, the TPM cannot allow the router to use the TLS key, and in this case, the router sends its measurement and the TPM quote to the array server for a precise integrity evaluation. To demonstrate the user story, we can simply enable the periodic refresh of the web page of the dashboard, and we enable the refresh every 10 seconds. Now we can move to the bottom part of the screen, and we will see the TPM commands executed and related to the establishment of the TLS connection. Here, for example, we can see the cc load command that is executed to load the TLS key. We see the definition of the policy session in order to unseal the TLS key, and the cc sign command in order to perform the TLS protocol. In this user story, the network administrator can also enforce the trusted routing policy. Since now the NMS periodically monitors the integrity of each router, it can also update the routing table of each router depending on the result of the integrity evaluation. In particular, in this case, router 2 is found compromised, and then the routing table of router 1 and router 4 are updated. In particular, the cost for reaching router 2 is 30, as shown in the yellow rectangle, and now the preferred path of the packets is router 1, router 3, and router 4. To demonstrate this user story, we connect to router 2 as an attacker, and we will perform an attack. Before that, we go to the console of the client, and we check the connectivity with the web server. Seems that the web server is reachable. We will also check in another console of the client the preferred path of the packet. And currently the packet goes through router 4, router 2, and router 1. At the moment, we can see on the left side in the dashboard that all the routers are in a good state. If we move to the right side to the output of Virt Manager, we go to the CPU usage column and we see some peaks which are due to the periodic attestation. If we move to the network utilization column, we see that now router 2 is a continuous line because this router is selected for the delivery of the packets, and router 3 is instead a non-continuous line because the network is used just for the periodic attestation. Now we will perform an attack on router 2, and we will modify a system file in a non-authorized way. At the next attestation, the NMS finds that something's wrong with router 2, but at this point asks the array server to do a verification with the explicit attestation. And this can be shown in the log of the software TPM of router 2. We see the cc quote command. And since the explicit attestation also fails, the NMS marks router 2 as bad and change the routing table, the cost in router 1 and router 4 to change the cost to 30. Now we move to the output of Virt Manager, and we see that in the network utilization column now in router 2 we don't have any more a continuous line, but we have a non-continuous line. And for router 3 instead we have a continuous line because now this router is selected for the delivery of the packets. We have a confirmation of this also in the output of the trace route in the console of the client. And of course, the client can connect to the web server. In this slide, we show some numbers for the performance, the difference between the TPM 2.0 and the QR TPM for each phase of the life cycle of the demonstrator. For the QR version of the demonstrator, we use Kuiper for the endorsement key, Dilithium for the attestation key and the TLS key, and SHA-256 for the other hash algorithm. We see that when there is intensive usage of the TPM, the core version of the demonstrator is 3 times slower than the version with TPM 2.0. In this slide, we also see a more detailed view of which TPM commands are executed for each phase of the life cycle of the demonstrator, and also the parameters that are passed to the TPM. We see that for most of the TPM commands, the QR version is 10 times slower. We also evaluated the network performance by capturing network packets from one router in the edge and checking the source. And we also found the time from when the NMS found the compromised router to when the packets are diverted away from the compromised router. And we found that 90.8% of the packets were successfully diverted away from the compromised router. This percentage is much better for a real scenario, for example, a Zoom call of 31 minutes, and the percentage is 99.92%. In this slide, we show the quantitative KPI, and for the targeted value, we used a reasonable pessimistic estimation, and nevertheless, our measured value for month 36 show that we satisfy all the quantitative KPI. The same applies for the qualitative KPI. Conclusion: in this project, we show that the migration from TPM 2.0 to QR TPM is feasible and is fully compatible with the system integrity use case of trusted computing with reasonable performance impact. Trusted computing and TPM can be used certainly in network infrastructure to increment their security, and also new trust-based use cases can be built upon the one that we defined. In order to have quantum resistant, we have to modify the entire trusted computing stack from TPM, firmware to crypto library and TLS. Thanks for your attention.